talk about a skills gap, but how do we actually know? Everyone is going to do a little pitch on what they think, but before that, Phil Ellis from Highways England has put together the evidence that we have so far. So we're not just talking about what we think is happening, but what do we know so far is actually happening in terms of a skills gap. So Phil, if you'd like to come up to the stage and tell us what you found.
Wonderful. So what I want to do is just to set the scene in terms of why bother, is there a problem around skills, and how can we actually try and quantify what that problem is. If you look at investment, global investment, so if I take it from a global perspective, and then we'll get narrower and narrower as we go through these next couple of slides. From a global perspective, in the next 15 years, 18 years, we're expecting global infrastructure to double. Okay, so if you look at it in terms of value, it now stands at about £6 trillion. We're expecting that to go to 13 trillion in the next 15 years. So that's a global perspective. Is there any demand out there for infrastructure and infrastructure skills and the investment that will actually be that? And that's without Trump, by the way. So if you look at it from a UK perspective, okay, now this is evidence that is some historic, some moving forward. I'm not sure how far the pointer will work, but if you look at this peak here, this was around about 2008. This is in terms of output and billions pounds worth of output, okay? This here is where we are today. So we're almost back at 2008 level investment figures. If you look at forecasts of where we're going, okay, that's the median, that's the upper bound, and that's the lower bound. Now, I've had these numbers checked post-Brexit, if you like. So there's been a downgrade in the forecast, but even if there's been a downgrade in, the medium to long term still is effectively the same type of picture in the same order of magnitude as there's been for quite a long time. So we're talking about moving to levels that are around about 150 billion, depending on which line and how confident you feel. If you look at where we are there, if we're back to where we were in 2008, and we're probably about 4% below that at the moment, if you then compare that to skills, where are we if we were like for investment to 2008, okay, I'll give you a sense of that. But if you can remember that first graph for a minute, because I'm going to take you back there. If you look at output by other indicators, so CBI or CITB, they have similar figures that all say we're a touch cautious, but then we move to some bigger numbers. And again, these have been downgraded in the last 2-3 weeks because of various economic indicators, but they're still very big numbers. But there are not many people who are going to forecast out past the next 5 years, except for something like that. So I've got stats that move us right out here, and that still moves right out in terms of UK output. In terms of Highways England, some of these figures, most of these figures should be familiar with to you. So we are moving within the period from a 1.9 billion to a 2.9 billion, okay? 50% increase. If you take us back historically, that takes us back pre this time. People that understand the sector, our number was a lot lower than that. And our number moving up here into RIS2 is something that you know is still under debate, but it should be quite a healthy number. Okay, so that sets the context in terms of output. If I can take you back to people, what does that mean in terms of people? From a highways perspective, there is about 21,000 people in the sector. If you pro-rata the numbers against our spend, we think we are going to need something like 31,000 people. That's an increase of about 12,000 people when you factor in people that will leave the sector in the next 5 years. That's a big number when you compare it to something like 21,000. So we need 12,000 people in round numbers in our sector. Okay? So what does that mean in terms of looking at some context around people and the history? Numbers. We used to be at around 2008, 2.4 million people in the industry. We've now moved down to, and I'm going back to 2015 figures, about 2.1 million people in the industry. So we've lost 10%. Okay, we are growing, But if we are around about 10% down on people, and we are 4% down on like-for-like output, okay, that means we've got a net deficit of skills for like-for-like output of 6%. That's today. Moving forward, how are we going to cope with the growth of investment and the competition at a national level and at an international level for skills? Okay, set that against employment. Unemployment at the moment, I think the latest figures I've seen, although I've got 5%, they're dropping, it's about 4.9%. Economists say that full employment is around 3%. So we're not that far away from 3%. Okay, so how and where are we going to get those skills? Okay, some figures and some information that's just come out from Build UK, and I think it's really important to try and absorb these messages. A quarter of contractors were unable to bid for work during Q3 2016 due to labour shortages. That's a current fact. Okay, the skills shortage is getting worse. And the reasons you can read for yourself, but we are talking about a lack of skills, low number of applicants, and a lack of qualified people, okay? I just want to talk about this slide because I think it is important to give a rounded perspective. This looks at our industry and the productivity in our industry over 20 years. The black line at the bottom, unfortunately, is the construction industry, okay? It shows around about over 20 years, there's been an increase in productivity of about 10%. When you look at manufacturing, which is this top line, there's been about 70%. So instead of looking for new skills, is there an opportunity to make better use of the existing skill base that we have? Is that a missed opportunity? Who is talking about that? Okay, and I think that probably is enough in terms of scene setting.